Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Newsletter 101 webinar. This is my first webinar, so I'm really excited to be doing it, but I'll admit a little bit nervous. It's my first time, and so hopefully all the technology will work well. I want you to know a couple of things about how this is going to work. So there is a chat box. I've got Tracy, who is our lovely virtual assistant who is helping, and she will be monitoring the chat in case there's anything I don't see right away. But please do ask your questions as you go. I'm going to do my best to answer all of your questions during the webinar, and I would love to get your input because these sessions are always better when people ask questions that pertain to themselves. So please do ask your questions in the chat. I also want you to know that there can be a lag, so it depends sometimes if it feels like it's taking me a really long time to answer a question. That may just be that there's a lag and we need to catch up. So that's totally normal, and I wanted to let you know that that's how it works. So thank you so much for being here. What this webinar is about, it's going to be about an hour, and I want to talk to you about newsletters. I want to talk to you about why I think they're important. I want to talk to you about how you can get started, and then we'll talk a little bit more about how you get people to then sign up for your newsletter list and what you should be saying to them. So I'm going to go through all of that. I want to give you a lot of content, a lot of value, so that you feel like you've walked away having learned something. I am at the end going to talk a little bit about an offer that I have to help you go even further than what we can do in this webinar. But first, we're going to just talk about what it's all about. So I'm going to mostly do this with slides. So I'm going to move over to my PowerPoint presentation. And again, if you have questions, please do stop me or just ask them and I'll get to them as I can. It looks like we have a fair amount of people in, so that's the other thing is with this Google Hangout as it goes live, I want to make sure that everybody's seeing things as it's working. So it seems to be going okay, and I'm going to switch over to my slides. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see my PowerPoint. And this is really all about newsletters, what you need to know, and how to get started. It's pretty much, you know, it's an introductory level. If you already have a newsletter, that's okay. Hopefully it'll just help you feel like you're in the right place or help you figure out where to go next. But we're starting from the basics, which is why do you need a newsletter? So my number one thing about newsletters, because I get a lot of pushback from people. People don't seem to think that sending newsletters is a great marketing tool. They feel like email is sort of, well, isn't Facebook and Twitter and all of those tools, haven't they replaced email? And the answer really is no, because how often do you check your email? I've asked this question a lot of times, and once I had somebody tell me they didn't check their email every day, but I don't know about you. I check my email more than I should, probably about 50 times a day. So while I do, especially because I work in the space, go into all of the other networks every day as well, email is still the thing that I check the most often, and that's what everybody checks the most often. So being able to send messages to people where they're always checking is really key and important. So then the next thing that people worry about is that people are going to feel spammed, that they're going to feel like they don't want to get emails. But the thing is, when you're building your email newsletter list, it is made up of people who have chosen to get your email. For whatever reason, whether, and we're going to talk about how to get people to want to sign up, but they've chosen to get that email. And so because of that, they don't feel like you are spamming them. They are far more likely to be inclined to read what you have to say than if it was something that they got from somebody they never asked for. So it's really important to think that the people who are getting your email want your information. So don't feel like you're bothering them. They asked for it. And then the other thing is people get to decide whether or not they open the email. Most social networks, the way that they work is that you may or may not see something that comes through. It's kind of like an ad on the radio or on TV, right? If you happen to be watching at that time, you're going to see it. But if you're not there, you're not going to see it. Whereas with an email, people will see your email. They may not open it, right? People don't open every email that they get, but at least they will have seen it, and they will have the chance to open it or not open it. That's why the subject line of your email is so important, because you're going to need to then convince people to open it. But the choice is there, as opposed to when you're on Facebook and they may just never have seen it at all. So those are a few of the reasons that you should send a newsletter, right? Be there because you're coming into a space that people are always checking. They asked for your content, and they're going to see it and get to decide whether or not to open it. So I hope all of this is coming through clearly for you. The more you guys ask questions or chat in the little chat box, the more I know this is coming through clearly, because this is a little bit different for me than when I see your faces in an event in live. So we're going to talk about tools, and there are a lot of tools that you can use to send email newsletters. I've listed a few here, and the importance with these is that they have a lot of they have a lot of things built into it that makes it better. So if you were to just send an email from your own email inbox, first of all, that causes all kinds of problems with spam and so on, and they get spam filtered. But the other thing is that these tools allow you to see how successful what you're doing is. They let you see who's opening it and how often people are opening it and what they're interested in. So it's really important to use a tool like this. We use MailChimp. I'm not necessarily going to say that I think that's the absolute best choice, but it has worked well for us. Aweber is another one that works really well. And so these are some of the more affordable options that I put up there. There are, there are more expensive and more detailed ones like Infusionsoft. So there's all kinds of things to figure out, but using a tool is the, instead of trying to do it without an email tool, is key. So how often should you send your newsletter? And right away, it's more, I think, almost everybody, when I say, I think ideally it should be once a week, which feels like too much to a lot of people, and most of those people have also been sending them maybe twice a year. So once a week feels like a lot. But again, part of it is, they don't have to read everything that you send, but you're staying top of mind. The more that you can stay top of mind to somebody, so that when they do need to make a buying decision, they think of you, the better, right? Excuse me. So once a week is a really great interval, in my opinion. But let's say once a week just feels like too much to you, which is fair, and I think that that's fine. Then instead of once a week, you just need to think you need to be consistent. So whether that is every 2 weeks, once a month, you need to be able to, you want people to expect it. The more they expect it and they know when they're going to get it, the more likely they are to read it. So I would say if it's the first Wednesday of every month if you want to do it once a month. If it's, every other Thursday. Being consistent is more important than being random in any way, right? So if once a week feels like too much, switch to just know when it is that you're going to send it and keep doing that. So I have a question, so I'm going to look from Claudette. With the new spam legislation, are there restrictions as to what can be included in the newsletter, such as update on activities, latest research, member drive? So the legislation is more in terms of sending out information without permission. And so if you have permission, and there are rules that let people send it without permission if it's not, for a commercial purpose. And we are gonna, this whole topic can be very in depth in terms of the legislation. And but the key to it is not what you're going to send, it's that you have permission to send it. So as long as you're getting permission from people and they're opting in, and there are all kinds of ways, and that's another thing that those softwares I talked about allow you to do, is get a double opt-in, where you're proving very clearly and with permanent records that the people who are getting your newsletter asked to do so. So we're not going to get too deep into the legislation today, but that's really the key parts of it, as opposed to making rules on what it is that you can send. Though, like I said, it's a little bit different if it's for non-commercial purposes. So we can, if you have specific questions, try to answer them a bit more offline as well. So I hope that answered your question, Claudette. All right. So what should you be saying in your newsletter? Always, in everything that you're doing with your online communications, the key is to remember that you are trying to provide value to your audience. It's about what you can give them more than what they can give you, because that's how you're going to become important to them. So while ultimately the goal is for them to, buy your product or do whatever it is that you want them to do, the way that you're going to get them to a place where they want to do that is to have provided value to them. So you need to figure out who it is that you're talking to and what do they want. And that's going to be different for everybody, but it's really one of the most important parts of any online communication. How are you going to give your audience what they want to get, so that they want to keep getting it, so that they want to keep opening your emails every week and see what you have to say? If you can do that, that's where you're going to get the true value out of online marketing. So for us, with Wellman Wilson, we try to provide value in the form of free information, right? So this webinar was free, and that's something that we're giving away, right? So when we have our email newsletters that go out, we always have more information that helps business owners learn how to use social media for free. That's what our audience is looking for. So you need to think about who your audience is and what do they want. There's a million options, and we're going to talk a bit more about that. But then once you've figured that out, you also need to make it fit in with your overall business goals, right? So once you put the two of those together, you can spend some time really figuring out and crafting the right kind of content to make your audience happy and achieve your goals. So what do they want? Here are some examples of ways you can do it. So free tips. Whether that's in the form of something short or little snippets, or it's in the a whole video or a blog post. Free tips are great. So all this valuable content, early access, you can do that in a newsletter. You could give somebody first access to sign up for a course or for sessions that may sell out. there's all kinds of ways. The VIP treatment, right? You're telling people that by being part of your newsletter list, they're important. And it's worth getting the newsletter because they're getting something other people don't. And you can do that with deals as well. So there's tons of examples of ways you can do that. But it's just clearly thinking about how you can provide that value. Okay, so I'm seeing a question. Sheila, I've recently heard you should only send a newsletter when you're making some sort of offer. Yay or nay? I don't think so. I think the key is that you should always try to have some kind of call to action in the newsletter to get them to do something. If you can, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're selling them or that, you know, it doesn't need to be something specific like that, but you do want to get them to do something as much as possible. And sometimes it's, you know, to get them to ask you a question. Sometimes it's to get them to go to Facebook and take part in a conversation. I think that having something for them to do is a good idea, but it doesn't need to be something where you're trying to sell them something. In fact, my inclination is to feel like that's going to start feeling a little bit too salesy, and people don't want to feel like you're constantly trying to get them to do something. You definitely should try to sell them things, right? That's the point. So you want to be doing that, and I have seen that happen sort of in the reverse, where people stop trying to offer too much because they don't want to be too salesy. So like, you definitely want to be making your offers, but I don't think that you need to have something specific to sell every time you send a newsletter. I think it's more important to be consistent, to be consistently providing valuable information to your audience that they want. And then so that it's that whole thing, so that when you do have an offer for them, they already have bought into you. They bought into your knowledge, your expertise, what if it's a product, right? They've bought into that by having seen the value of everything you've already provided them. And then when the offer comes, they're far more likely to take advantage of it. Okay, so Sheila's continued with, so replace offer with call to action. What calls to action do you think resonate the best from a newsletter? I think there are a lot of different ones. One that, you know, has worked really well for us is to ask people to reply, right? So reply to this email and tell us something, or reply to this email and, you know, 2 people are going to get a chance for. So you know that when the people who actually replied and answered that question, you know that they read the whole thing. You know that they are really interested and engaged with your content. And so that right there shows you that they're a good fit for you. They're a good prospect for you. So it's really hard to have a general, you know, what will always work, but it's that personal touch, right? In an email in particular, when you can make people feel like you're talking to them and that they're talking to you, like when people hit reply and ask a question to the person who sent them email and they feel like they're going to get an answer that's just for them, it makes them feel a little bit more special, let's say. And that is really something that resonates with people. It's just how people will feel more special and important if you use their name. So using their name in an email is always a great idea. That works even on Facebook, right? If somebody leaves you a comment and they reply, "Thanks, Sheila," just using somebody's name makes it feel a little bit more personalized and less generic. So I think that that's a big part of newsletters, is it has the opportunity to feel personal, and when they reply to you, then that really gives you that personal touch. I find that works really well. Other than that, sending them to other channels to have conversations, right? You're sending them to a blog post, you're asking them, you always want to try and give people something to do and have it not be too vague. So be specific in what you want people to do. So don't just go say, leave me a comment on my latest blog post. You want to say, tell me what you think the best way to get people to sign up to your newsletter is, right? You want to try and make it as easy as possible for people to respond to you, because if people have to think about it for too long, whether it's on a Facebook post, on a blog post, hitting reply, then they sort of lose interest. If it takes too long to come up with an answer, then they lose interest and they sort of move on. So I hope that helps. Isabel, what's the best size for a newsletter if you send it bi-weekly? A few paragraphs, a few pages. I think that the better thing is for it to not be too long. One of the beautiful things about the tools I mentioned earlier is that they have great analytics, right? So you can go in and see where people are clicking and where people are engaging, and having links to other places is good just to see how far people are reading down. I think that you want to err on the side of not too long, and if you have that much content, send more often. But a good 500 words is split into little paragraphs is totally fine. I think ours are probably a bit shorter than that, and you just need to make sure that the most important thing that you have to say is at the beginning. You also want to make it very skimmable, right? So if you have a lot of content, make sure you have headers and sections so that people can skim through and find whether or not they want to dig in further. We've had a lot of great success with the PS. And so one of the reasons almost every single newsletter we send has a PS at the bottom is because people will scan. They won't necessarily read the whole newsletter, but they'll always check out the PS at the end. So just make sure that you put the most important pieces of information in places that will stand out the most, and then check your analytics. Every audience is different, and I always feel like when I'm giving that answer, it's a bit of a cop-out, because I'm like, well, I can't really tell you. But it's true. If you have a different kind of audience who is looking and thirsting for really long articles on something, they're going to be more inclined to read something longer. But I think the general rule is to err on the side of not too much, easy to read, and you want to drive people to your, like, the newsletter is an amazing way to drive people to your website. So maybe instead of putting too much information in the newsletter, you just introduce an article or something, and then you send them elsewhere to get the rest of it. So I hope that answers your question, Isabel. I'm going to keep going. I put an example here. So Sarah McConnell, somebody I know, but on her website, she has a very clear description of what you're going to get when you get her newsletter. She's making it super clear that what the value is. And so I think that's a great idea, because you want to make sure that people know, right? So this is it. How do you build your list? You need to tell people what's in it for them. Because sign up for my newsletter doesn't really mean anything, right? It's too vague, right? So what's in it for me? If I say, sign up for my newsletter, I don't know what why do you deserve to be in my inbox? So you then need to tell them why. You should sign up for my newsletter because I'm going to give you free tips on how to use social media for your business. That's the why. And so Sarah, in that previous example, is telling you why. She's telling you because I'm going to go back, because you're going to get tips, you're going to find out places in Ottawa to go with your family, you're going to get discounts, you're going to get first dates, right? There's all kinds of things that you can offer, but give them a good reason why. Because in this age of so much information, because that's really the thing, there's just so much content coming at us all the time. There's no denying that. So you need to be able to stand out, and you need to tell people why they should pay attention to you. So always figure out what is your why. So the other thing is just to tell people you have an email list, right? You want to tell them at every opportunity. Is it in your email signature? Is it front and center and super obvious on your website? When you're in person, can you tell people, right? If you are chatting with somebody in an event, and as you talk about what you do, you can say, oh, you know what, and if you want, you can sign up to my newsletter because I will give you more information on this on a regular basis. So give them the why, but just don't be hesitant to tell people to sign up. Here is the front page of our website. We try to make it pretty obvious. It's here on the front page with an arrow, and we have it on multiple other pages. Make it something that's important. Building this email list is a huge part of your online marketing. The other thing is to have an opt-in. So today, to sign up for this webinar, we tried to get you signed up for the newsletter. So that's an opt-in, right? You got something in exchange for giving us your email address, and that's this free webinar. But there are other things. We have a daily social media checklist, which is a checklist on what you can be doing every day. So that's something that we're giving people in exchange for their email address. So is there something that you can do like that, where you're giving somebody something and then you get them on their list, on your list? That's a really good and effective way of building a list. So these are some I pulled off the internet, but this is something, just a discount code. Get $20 off, get 10% off, whatever it is. People love a deal. So if you're selling something where you can give a discount on, if it's a product or something like that, getting that initial offer discount for people is something people are willing to give you their email address for that. They may unsubscribe later, but that's not the point, right? You got the chance to at least have that first contact, and then hopefully your content will hold up to then keep them interested and watching. So I mentioned before, right, that those tools that I mentioned are really important because they have all kinds of, tools built into it, and measuring is big. Being able to see what's working and adjust based on your audience, because they're going to be different. They're going to like different things. So you get to go in there and see what is working, right? Which newsletters are getting opened more, and can you figure out what the difference is between them? When are you getting certain newsletters with more unsubscribes than others? Can you figure out if there's a correlation, or is it a coincidence? Are people clicking through the links that you're sharing or not? And then A/B split testing, which is, I think, one of the coolest things these tools have, lets you separate something. So you can take one newsletter and send it to a section of your list with different information. So you can either do it where it comes with a different subject line. So you can send it to some of your list with one subject line and another section of your list with a different subject line, and then see which one performs better. And that lets you understand your audience better. What is it that they like? You can, I've seen some, interesting experiments where you take the same subject and one subject line is a positive and one is a negative. So for example, 5 ways to send a great newsletter would be one, and then the negative would be, are you doing anything that makes people not want to open your newsletter? So essentially the subject and what you're describing is the same. That negative, the one that says, don't do this wrong, really works with a lot of people. So getting to try that kind of thing out really works. You can also do it with the time of day that it gets sent, or who it's from. And we did that one with, we tried it out with coming from Wellman Wilson Consulting or from Lara and Karen. And Lara and Karen gets more opens. So it's really interesting to play around with that. So I'm going to talk a bit about a course that's coming up, the offer that I have, and then I'm just going to go back to me and we'll answer questions and see what else we can do to help you out. So we've got a 5-week course that's launching on October 1st. So it's going to come by email. So it comes once a week. You get an email with an email lesson. We're going to cover these topics, and Tracy is going to post in the chat and going to pop in a link to be able to read this more in detail on your own time. But these are the topics we're going to cover over 5 weeks. It's $49. There's also a Facebook group, and this is the introductory price as we launch this course for the first time. So it starts on October 1st, 5 weeks of emails, so that's this, and then and it's a super low price as we introduce it, but I do have a specific webinar only offer, which is what's going to regularly be $199. It's going to be $149 for you guys, and it's the same thing, the 5 weeks of emails, but it's also going to include 2 30-minute coaching calls, which is the accountability in some ways. So people, you know, the more you get to have somebody who's following up with you and helping you, the more likely it is to sort of get done. So that's part of it, and then we will also review one of your newsletters. So if you're wanting somebody to look over what you've set up before it gets sent out for the first time, this package will help you feel really comfortable with everything that you're doing. So that's only for people in the webinar. There's some links that are going to be popped up in the chat as well that you can purchase them. So the webinar special is only for the next few days. You will also get the links to this and the overall document in an email that'll come to you after the webinar. So those are the offers I had for you. That's it. I did it in about half an hour. So I'm going to come back and I want to see if anybody has any other questions that I can answer for them. In just a second. All right, I'm back. I think you should be able to see me again. Did anybody have any other questions about that or about the course? So if not, that's okay. I hope that you found all of this really useful. Like I said at the beginning, this is the first time I've done a webinar, so we'd really appreciate any feedback. If you want to send us an email or even leave a comment in the chat on what you thought, we'd love to hear that from you. I hope you got a lot of value out of it. I don't think I'm seeing any more questions, though I will hang on for another minute. And then if that's that, we can wrap it up. We do want to continue and do a few more webinars so that, you know, this is something we've been wanting to do, and I think, you know, if there are any topics that you're specifically interested in, we'd love to see that too, so that we can keep providing this kind of value. So let us know if this is something you like and if you want to keep seeing them and what you want to see them about. And I do see a couple of other questions. Donna, the concerns with the new laws. So we talked about it very briefly, possibly before you got here. You need to make sure you have permission from people before you start sending the newsletters. And we do have a couple of blog posts that gets into that more thoroughly, but it's really that you need to make sure you have permission, and we are going to get into that more in depth for sure in the course as well. So hopefully that helps. And then another question. What about tying signups into your social? You should definitely have it everywhere you can. So you can set that up into your Facebook page so that people can sign up there. And I think, you know, you want to tell people that on your Facebook page. Say, are you getting my newsletter? Here's a link to sign up. You know, you can get this opt-in, you can do this, right? So tell people why and tell them all over the place, right? It's really great to try and get people on your list, but they're not going to know about it unless you blast it all over the place. So make it as obvious as possible in as many places as possible. Liz. So she says, I know we link a lot to our blog from the newsletters, and one of the reasons is your blog and your website, that's your home base, right? Ultimately, you want people to be in your home base. So putting links to our blog is a big part of what we do so that we can get you to our website. So that it's definitely good. And the other thing is that then that newsletter isn't necessarily very long, right? You read a little bit about one topic, a little bit about something else, and then you get to decide whether or not you want to read more and go over to the blog to read the whole article. Some people will send the whole thing in the newsletter. You can do that. That's valuable to your audience. That's great. But for me, the key is always getting them to your home, and that's your blog. Okay. Donna's also asking about the laws and spamming. So again, I think that with the anti-spam law, the big key is getting permission, right? So you don't, unless there are some exceptions in certain cases. So it's such like there's so much information, it's not easy to go into in depth at the moment. But my specific answer is get permission, right? So that's the big part, is you want people to say that they want your content, and then you're not spamming them, right? So don't add them to a list without their permission. Don't say you're going to be added unless you uncheck this. It's that they specifically are saying, yes, I want your information. So Karen has shared a link in the chat about the legislation, and we're gonna be getting more in depth in the course if that's something that you want to take. So hopefully that helped and answered some of your questions. All right. I'm glad you guys are asking lots of questions. That's great. I will definitely be taking some of these ideas for other webinar topics into consideration, and hopefully planning some fairly regularly. If you have any more questions, please don't hesitate to send us an email and ask, or to ask about the course, which I think is a good way to sort of get started. So I hope that was good and helpful for everybody. Thank you for the excellent feedback. We'll be in touch when we're ready for our next webinar. So thank you.